Joseph R. Pierce, Petty Officer First Class Aviation Electrician's Mate, retired. Well, when HSL started, then we hunted submarines. It's Helicopter Anti-Submarine Squadron Light 30. And that was HSL 30, turned into 34. We moved to Norfolk. They moved while I was away. I was in the Mediterranean, came back and they had moved to Norfolk, like the old joke. They moved while I was away, but I found them. And I got out of the Navy in Norfolk, went to art school for a year and a half, met my wife, got married. She was a reservist, so I went back into the Navy Reserves in Selfridge Field in Detroit. And there I worked in intermediate maintenance, like a bench technician on electrical gear. And I learned to solder and fix, basic stuff. It wasn't very complicated. And she got pregnant and stopped working, and I went for my active duty in 2 weeks, and they offered me a full-time job with medical. And I said, that'll pay for the baby. So I said, sure. They said they would send us to South Weymouth, Massachusetts. She was from Hartford, Connecticut, and sounded perfect. The orders read Lakehurst, New Jersey. So I was back in Lakehurst as a bench technician. I was attached to the helicopter squadron of 75, but they sent me to intermediate maintenance, and the guy there was awesome. My supervisor was Doug Spontek. He made commander. He went Mustang. He was a first class, and he, unlike a lot of people in the Navy at the time, a lot of people had this power called expert power. They're the only ones that knew how to do things. This guy taught me how to do everything. From the paperwork to the fixing everything, supply. He taught me everything. And it was the best supervisor I had in the Navy. Commander Doug Spontek, retired. He's awesome. But I went to schools, let's see, instrument repair. I went up to, it was in Chicago. It was a reserve base in Chicago. Glenville, something like that. It was up in Chicago. And they had an instrument repair shop there, so I saw how they did it. I came back to Willow Grove and they set up a shop for us. It was supposed to be a clean room. We never approached clean room standards, but we did learn how to hermetically seal instruments and repair them and everything, so it was cool. And it took me a whole 2 weeks to set up the battery shop that they sent me there for, train my guys. I never had to go back in the battery shop the rest of the time. So the excuse for sending me there was to set up a battery shop, and it was not a big deal. So I did instruments after that. And then they closed that unit 2 years later and sent me over to Willow Grove to finish my 2 years at Willow Grove, because I was a battery technician. I set up the battery shop in a new intermediate maintenance there. And I ended up going to instrument repair school, and I went to Jacksonville, Florida, where they do depot level, which, intermediate maintenance is one, I don't want to call it higher, but more intricate and organizational, which is the guy in the shop fixing the airplane. But then you go to the parts and you fix those. But the next level is inside the parts. And that was, I learned that in Jacksonville at the depot there. It was cool. So I used a microscope and fixed circuit boards, chips and stuff. That was pretty cool. However, with all that training, they said, well, you got orders going to the West Coast. I said, what are you talking about? I put in for DC, and they sent me to NAS Alameda, California, and the Oakland side of the bay. Now, I'm the supervisor of a shop of an airplane who I've had no schools and know nothing about. And eventually, we muddled through. 5 years later, we had the best squadron in the Navy. We had 13 A-7s flying over Alameda. We got them all up. Alameda was really nice. It was beautiful. I never saw a mosquito for 5 years. The base was well run. I enjoyed it. The housing was okay. The housing in the Navy is like the projects. I was born in the projects in Cleveland, and it reminded me of, the projects. And we had 6 families there in one building. And we were the only ones that were all white. We had Filipino, Mexican, Black Mexican, Filipino. This was, and it was wonderful because my kids, our babysitters were all making lumpia and pancit, and they were eating all that good stuff, and they thought it was normal. We went to the East Coast, and it was like, where's lumpia? So yeah, it was very nice. And the base, like I said, we had a hangar, the airplanes were old, A7, A's and B's, and we had an engine problem. We had an aircraft flying at 200 feet at 400 knots, getting ready to pop up, and the engine exploded. The guy had no time to react. And they come to find out there was a guy somewhere in a depot putting the engine together wrong. So all the A7s, they had to pull all the engines out and re-inspect them. Well, we had 13 airframes, so we had to play, what do you call that? Every night we're pulling engines out and putting in an airplane where the other systems were up. So we had to either keep all the airplanes up all the time, or if there was any problem, they pulled the engine. And I worked at night, and that's when they did all that. We take it to high power, run it up, and make sure it could fly. But yeah, that was tough. It was a whole different thing than the intermediate maintenance. And we went to Fallon, Nevada for bombing. We won a couple times. Red Flag, or whatever they call it. It was in Fallon, Nevada. And we'd haul all our stuff through the mountains. And they had casinos and all. It was just, you know, it was a much different thing than Lakehurst, New Jersey, for sure, or Willow Grove.